This Trumpet Extensions video is all about the vast microtonal possibilities of the trumpet. But first, what is microtonality? Very simply, microtonality is a usage of intervals and thus pitches that are narrower than a microtone or a half step. There are an infinite number of possible frequencies or pitches between a single half step, even if the human ear isn't able to recognize all of them, but there are plenty that we can indeed hear. For instance, what's between a G sharp and an A? Here's just a few. Now, to do a thorough job of teaching you about this, whether you're a trumpeter or composer, I'd like to take a quick jump backwards and address the basic physics, the fundamentals of how this thing works. As you likely already know, at its simplest, like the internet, the trumpet is just a series of tubes with 3, sometimes 4 valves attached. These valves change the length of the instrument, which gives us access to 7 different natural harmonic series. The trumpet works because of the harmonic series, and so at its core, it's a microtonal instrument tuned pretty closely to what's called just intonation. So right off the bat, microtonality. On the trumpet, nearly every note has an alternate fingering or an alternate way to access the same pitch but from a different harmonic series. For instance, I can play a C with no valves utilized, the 4th partial from the harmonic series starting with C, but can also play that same note using 2 and 3, albeit about 14 cents lower than using no fingers, which would be the 5th partial from the harmonic series starting on A flat. Though there are a few exceptions, which I'll mention in a moment, between these alternate fingerings and the ability to move the 3rd and the 1st valve slide while we're playing, we as trumpeters are able to make the instrument just about any length we want, which translates to playing just about any microtone that we want. Now, the exceptions all exist in the low register. There are 2 notes that have no alternate fingerings and are also not played with a valve combination that uses a movable slide, C4 and B3. It's not that we can't do anything microtonally there, it's only that we have to use our lip to bend the pitch, which results in a different color and slightly less immediate accuracy. For instance, here's a C and then a C quarter flat an octave higher, which has a change in frequency but a consistent tone quality because I'm only changing the length of the instrument, not my embouchure, followed by a C going to that same C quarter flat in the lower octave. Composers. There are plenty of resources, both physical books and online, describing the numerous common practice microtonal systems and the best ways to notate each, so we don't need to do that here. But as it pertains specifically to this video and writing for trumpet, there are a few things that I personally really appreciate from composers when receiving a piece that utilizes microtonality. 1. Be very clear with the system that you're using and your expectations for the accidentals that you use. Because there is overlap sometimes between systems and the notation, there can be some confusion, and this can be avoided by using a key at the beginning of the piece. 2, moving from microtone to microtone isn't uniform in terms of what is required from your trumpeter. Some are quite easy, while others are more awkward and require significant slide and valve changes. This means that some can be done very quickly and fluidly, while others might take a bit more preparation. If you're planning to write a particularly virtuosic or fluid passage, be sure to speak with your trumpeter, or really any trumpeter that can help you with this, about the feasibility of such a passage. And fingerings. It's unnecessary for you as the composer to mark the fingerings. Each player is different, each instrument is different, and so what works well for me might not work exactly the same way for another player. So what's most helpful, again, is being very clear with your notation and the resultant pitch that you would like to hear. Trumpeters. Before we get to a few nuts and bolts of microtonal playing, I'd love to show 2 examples of some music that is very clearly notated. First up, Liza Sobel's incredibly effective and compelling Groan, the second of 3 etudes she wrote for me in 2021. This piece utilizes quarter tones, notes that are exactly halfway between 2 notes of a half step, or 50 cents in either direction. Next is Jeffrey Gavett's musicorum et cantorum written for loadbang. While the notation for this looks complicated, accompanying the score and parts was an extraordinarily detailed description of his notation, as well as a list of the exact cent differences he wanted. So in my part, I wrote not only the fingerings I planned to use, but also the exact cent differences I needed to produce. Trumpeters, I wish I could tell you that there's a quick way to get good at playing microtonally, but the truth is that it just takes practice and experience. So whether you commission a new piece or begin the search for the great deal of wonderful microtonal music that already exists involving trumpet, commit to play something, start practicing it, and before you know it, you'll be doing it. I would suggest using a tuner to make sure that we're doing this exactly correctly. Other than that, I will give you one bit of advice. Something that was a real game changer for me when I made this realization. As trumpeters, we're used to our 12-tone chromatic scale. Sure, we make adjustments in ensembles, tune the third of those major triads, but for the most part, a G is a G, an A is an A. So when I started playing some of this music, I thought of the microtones as derivations from one of the 12 notes I was so very comfortable playing. Now, I'm not a younger version of my parents. My son is not a younger version of my wife or I. I'm an individual, my own person, he's his own person, and you are your own person. And though this analogy may be a bit of a stretch, these microtones are their own pitches, with their own sort of personality, their characteristics, their resonance, and their own center. Once you approach them as their own notes, find the sweet spot where they each resonate, suddenly this all becomes much, much easier. Physically, we're not manipulating our chops, only changing the length of the instrument and putting the notes where they want to be, where they need to be. And from here, we can start making some serious music. I hope you have fun with this.